are promoted by the international labour movement of which South Africa is part of. Workers' Day originated within the historical struggles of workers and their trade unions for solidarity between working people and in their struggles to achieve fair employment standards. May the 1st is a national public holiday in more than 80 countries around the world. Since 1994 and 20 years into democracy, the day is celebrated in South Africa every year. Now, we are joined in Port Elizabeth by Dennis George from the Federation of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA, and from the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Cosatu, is Patrick Craven joining us here in Johannesburg, as well as Joseph Maqaheni from the National Council of Trade Unions. Guys, thank you so much. And Dennis, thank you for joining us in Port Elizabeth.
Good morning. Good morning to all the listeners. Also, good morning, Patrick and Joseph.
Good morning.
Dennis, I would like to start here in Johannesburg. Patrick, with you, can you just tell us, International Workers' Day, give us some background pre-94, where this day came from?
Well, it goes back as far as the 1880s, following an incident in Chicago, which I won't go into too much detail, in which workers were killed. And the Trade Union International Federation of the time, shortly afterwards, decided that the day on which this happened, the 1st of May, should become Workers' Day. And as your intro said, it's now recognized as a holiday in 80 countries. It's celebrated, I suspect, in far more than that, even when it's not a holiday. In South Africa, it became particularly contentious because it wasn't a public holiday. And there was a big campaign led by Cosatu in its very early years to have it made a public holiday. And in fact, they more or less made it a holiday anyway by having a huge stay away. And in the context of the time, that was very important because there were huge movements of workers anyway against apartheid, and somehow May Day symbolized the struggle of workers for not just a day's holiday, but for a complete change in the whole apartheid system.
Patrick, how will Cosatu be celebrating Workers' Day? I understand you've got a couple of rallies across the country to go.
We have 27 rallies. The big national one is in Polokwane, where the Cosatu President Stumo Dlamini will be speaking with the ANC President and the SACP General Secretary. But there are many, many others. There isn't time to go into them all, in all the main centres and indeed some very small places. And we must stress it isn't just a sort of hard political day. There will be music, entertainment, food, and we would urge all your viewers to come along and enjoy a good Workers' Day holiday.
Dennis, I would like to get to you in Port Elizabeth. How should this day be reflected in South Africa according to FEDUSA?
I think on the reflection terms, I think we have made some good progress. If you remember the campaign that we started off with, you know, when trade unions said very clearly that workers should work for 8 hours at least. You know, they should have 8 hours for leisure, and they should 8 hours for rest within a 24-hour workday. You know, I think what is important for us going forward is that we want to look at what is the situation of workers in terms of their quality of employment. And then secondly, we want to look at the issue of the unemployment situation in this country, because there's many people in our country that are able to work, but they cannot find a space in the labor market. And then thirdly, we want to look at the systemic issues that is affecting working people in this country.
Dennis, how has the role of unions changed post-94, and what has been gained 20 years into democracy?
Look, I think we have made a lot of progress in terms of amplifying the voice of working people in NATLAC through bargaining councils, so that the trade unions can have a say on behalf of the members what should the salaries and conditions of employment of workers should be. But I think that working people are facing other huge challenges that could be addressed through NATLAC and in social partnership with government and business, because working people are still living out in Soweto or in Port Elizabeth, in New Brighton, which is sometimes far from the workplaces. And the prices of transport are increasing because we have no control over petrol prices. And those are the things that eat into the disposable income of working people. And those are the kinds of things that we want to look in, but to also look at the social wage for people's housing and so forth.
Then, Joseph, I want to get back to you here in Johannesburg. What are the biggest challenges within the labour movement at the moment?
Thank you very much. You see, the biggest challenges for the labour movement and the labour movement that need to focus is to ensure that Labour Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and other laws which are there are implemented. We must ensure that monitoring and implementation were part of that at the workplaces, because that's where it matters most. Because even if there are laws that are good, but if the labour movement were not focusing on worker issues using the relevant laws that we fought for even before 1994, because you can have government. Government is for business and labor and everybody in the street. Our role, therefore, is to ensure that as workers, our shop stewards are trained so that they can handle the issues at the point of origin. Because when we look back as NACTU, from 1994 to date, we are the worst losers as workers. Looking at conditions, because the structures of wages and other things are still the same, they're still intact. So you need, therefore, that as a labor movement, we are part and parcel at the point of origin where these things needed to impact on workers to improve their living conditions. In particular, the issue of the labor brokers, the issue of e-tolls, those are impacting on the workers. We need consistent to fight those battles that we're fighting before 1994, because things are not changing to our liking as a labor movement.
Now, our hearts today should really go out to the platinum workers. Would you say that they have anything to celebrate today?
You're correct, because AMCU, those workers are members and an affiliate of NACTU. They have nothing to celebrate, because indeed they have taken their right, that is in the Constitution, to go on a protected strike. But because the laws of this country, you cannot force the employers. Although the employers, everybody knows that your CEOs in these 3 mining houses, they earn equals to those abroad. As such, they don't want to share with the workers this. As such, there's nothing to celebrate. Indeed, all what we need to do is to strengthen our fight so that our members get what they need, because it's affordable and it's fair.
Patrick, I want to know if you want to add something to that. I also want to know what, as Cosatu, the challenges that we still face in the labour movement today.
Well, the biggest challenges are jobs and poverty, and we would have to add inequality. Unemployment is still far, far too high, which is not only a human tragedy for the people who can't get jobs, but also it's a total misuse of the country's resources. All those unemployed workers could be creating wealth and a better society. Also, from the trade union point of view, it obviously makes it easier for the employers to get away with exploitation and avoiding their legal responsibilities if they know that there are lots of unemployed workers who could take those jobs. Poverty, we believe, is key. That is why we've called for a national minimum wage. And inequality, I think, is particularly important in South Africa, which is now the most unequal society in the world. And it's one of the main reasons why there are so many disputes. A report in a Sunday paper indicated that the top executives of South African companies are now the second highest paid in the world. Only in the United States do they get more. So that means that their counterparts in Europe are actually taking less. But if you look at the workers' wages in Europe compared to South Africa, they're about 10 times as high. I mean, it's a huge difference. Workers are underpaid and must get a better reward for creating the wealth which those top salaries, after all, come from.
So just on that note, going forward, what are the achievements that still need to be made?
Well, full employment, ultimately, or as close as possible as we can get to it. A decent wage for everybody so that nobody is forced to live in poverty. But linked to that, we need major improvements in education, in healthcare, in public transport. And in particular, the issues which have already been mentioned, labour brokers and e-tolls. We need to not just create a better life for workers at work, but a better life when they go home, when their children need to be educated, when they fall ill and need healthcare. All these are issues which we think are important. We're sometimes accused of being too political, but you cannot avoid getting involved in these issues which are political, but which are outside the workplace, but nevertheless of great importance to the workers.
Dennis, just back to you in Port Elizabeth. Do you agree with what's being said here in Johannesburg? And then just what's your response to reports of divisions within the South African labour movement?
Okay, look, let me deal with the first issue of divisions. You know, you will always find that there is factions and people pulling in different directions. But what the leadership of NACTU, Cosatu, and FEDUSA have taken at the beginning of this year was to say that we as leaders must work together to foster unity, social cohesion, cooperation, and collaboration. And that is something that we are very firm about, and that is something that we're going to take to the next level. But I think what is also important is that we need to put out the current fires that is burning at the moment. The situation on the Platinum Belt is something that is of great concern. As the situation is standing now, it is a lose-lose situation. Everybody is losing out. The workers, the companies, the communities, and government through taxes and income. And what we want to encourage both the employers and the leaders of AMCO is to come to a settlement as quickly as possible so that they can take the process forward so that we can have the Platinum Belt contribute towards the economy. But I think what is also very important for us is to recognize that about 2/3 of the people in our country that's working in in our labor market is earning less than 3,500 Rand per month. And that is why it's important for us to find a way to upskill our people so that their take-home check can be more, that we must also look to see how we can improve the collective bargaining process so that we can narrow the wage gap between the people that is earning more at the top and those that are earning less at the bottom. Because I think it's through skills development and worker education that we can ensure that we can improve the productivity of the companies and the income for the workers.
Now, are trade unions these days battling to define their role as workers' representatives?
Yes. Look, what has happened is that the Minister of Higher Education and Training have created a task team. And within this task team, he said we must define and come up with recommendations to say what is worker education. So worker education for us is a very broad concept. It first of all has to deal with leadership. It has to deal with leadership in the workplace. And it also has to deal with what is the role and the responsibility of a worker in a company and also in working in NGOs. Because the whole process must be that we must turn the mindset and change the mindset of South African workers so that we can realize that we are competing in a global competitive environment and that it's important for us to be at the best we can be to make a positive contribution to eradicate poverty, unemployment, and also inequality.
Dennis, thank you so much. That's Dennis George joining us from Port Elizabeth. And Joseph, I just want to ask you, does South Africa, according to NACTU, require a Workers' Party to represent their political and labour needs?
You see, South African society is very dynamic. If Workers' Party come into play, we will have no objection to that. But labour movement, whether it's a Workers' Party, whatever party you call, labour movement must be independent of those. If they support those political parties, whether it's labour because of their policies, but when they don't perform as expected, we must damn them. So we'll have no problem. Like other parties, we don't have a problem. But if their policies are not relevant to the issues of the workers, indeed, it will be like any other party, which I won't mention, which are anti-workers.
Joseph, thank you so much. And that's Joseph Maqaheni joining us from the president of NACTU. And then, Patrick, just the final word goes to you. Over the next 20 years, where are we heading?
Well, I don't know, but I hope we will be heading for a more prosperous society, but above all, one where the prosperity is far, far more equally shared between all the people of South Africa, and particularly, of course, the workers, who, after all, are ultimately the people who create that prosperity.
Patrick, thank you so much. And that was Patrick Craven joining us from Cosatu. Like you already know, today we are celebrating Workers' Day. Now let's take